All right, welcome back to Burn the Louvre. We're going to look at Season 1, Episode 3 of Yellowjackets. I think it would be useful to sort of give an overview of the mini stories we're going to see play out. So this is sort of, in the way that I said last one was Misty's episode, this is Thais's episode. She gets, we're going to see the modern Thaisa continuing to struggle with these conflicting ideas of her personal life with her wife and her kid, and then her professional life and the demands of that, and the stress of having these two things at once. She's gonna specifically, it's gonna take the form of an attack ad from her opponent. She's trying to figure out how she wants to deal with that. Also, her kid Sammy's having behavioral issues. And those things sort of dovetail, and his issues are caused by the stress of the campaign. Eventually, they're going to resolve the thing with Sammy for the moment. She's going to channel this sort of latent killer inside her to respond to the attack ad. And then we're going to there's always something we leave hanging to keep the interest going, so the way that pays off is now we're going to wonder even more if Sammy is disturbed, and also a little bit of if Thaisa is. With Shauna, we just found out she saw that text, so she thinks Jeff, her husband's, cheating on her. She's going to follow him to a hotel. She's going to coincidentally meet Adam there. They're going to get along great. She's going to see something that she thinks confirms Jeff is cheating on her. And it's going to end with her and Adam getting a hotel room of their own. So there's not a specific question launched there, but we are sort of left wondering now, how's that going to play out? We have Natalie and Misty on their road trip, on their sort of they're sort of the Brian and Stewie of the show. They are going to track down Travis. They get to his house. They get arrested for breaking in. They get out of jail. And eventually they're going to find Travis dead. And that's going to launch a big thing. So these endings have to feel like an ending and also leading us to what's next. So that answers the big question of where's Travis? And now Natalie's going to say he didn't kill himself. It looks like he killed himself, but she doesn't believe it for various reasons. So now we want to watch the next episode to find out what happened there. And then in the past, roughly speaking, they're going to move on from the original site. They're going to find this lake. And they're going to then physically, literally, just moving from one place allows them to then move to the next place because they see the house on the hill. They're going to go find the house, which becomes their home for the rest of the season, or a couple seasons. And we're also going to introduce these ideas of like there's something maybe supernatural going on in the woods. So we start with this scene now. So in the past, the 1996 timeline, I mentioned part of the reason I really wanted to look at this show is because I've learned these certain tools that I know can be used to draw people in. Those tools are utilized less in the 96 timeline versus the 2021, and yet 96 is what I was more interested in. So, and I like the current timeline as well, but the 96 timeline's a bit, it gives more time to breathe, and the things that I've sort of isolated that I really like about it, at least that are present in this episode, are the idea of just having problems and different people coming up with solutions and trying to figure out what the best one is. There's something very compelling about like that sort of puzzle, solving a puzzle aspect, but specifically with like different opinions on it. And then also just the group dynamic, how that plays in. Again, with Jackie, ultimately we see being an outcast has big consequences, but it's not a super driving force in the text on a minute-to-minute basis. But that is something that I'm always tracking in my mind. So it's important to be aware of these things, even if maybe the filmmakers didn't specifically need that, or intend that, or focus on that as a particularly important thing. But if that's what keeps us watching, that's good to know. So we have this opening scene where they are having a service for the people who have died. Oftentimes something that I get caught up in negatively with my writing is like, well, okay, where do ideas even come from? And I sort of get stuck in this meta idea before, when it's good to have things plotted before you start writing, but you have to explore to a certain extent, and also it's going to change anyway by the time you're going to revise things, so you can't know everything beforehand. But one thing that really can be useful in order to generate material is to just think about what, if this were happening in the real world, what things would they run into? It doesn't have to be carefully plotted beyond that. Just start coming up with ideas where what would happen. And I would say I don't obviously I don't have any special insight into what went on in the writer's room here. This scene, I don't see how it fits into a specific piece of an overall puzzle, but it is something that I would think, well, that's something that they're going to do, right, if this were really happening. So they are summing up what they know about these people. So you come up with a situation, then you can find the things that are interesting about it, vis-a-vis the individual characters. Right, so of course Laura Lee is leading this prayer as the Jesus lady. They're taking inventory of what they know of these people, and they realize they don't know them very well, which is kind of a sad thing in itself. All they know is one girl was good. They remember she was good at geometry or trigonometry, and just the juxtaposition of that with her lying dead is kind of a powerful image, how far removed they are from the world that they're used to. And then it's going to lead us into an interesting thing that they do with Thaisa. So she gets her own extra timeline in this episode of her as a little kid. And it's going to have its own setup, build, payoff over the course of the episode. And it's her... she's remembering her grandma dying. And the grandma's talking to her about death. And it's going to start okay, and then it's going to get very scary. So the transition here is because they were talking about death. Now, the things that this brings up have more to do with the guy with no eyes and the sort of supernatural / darkness inside Thaisa. So it's not specifically about how she thinks about death, but that's what gets us there in this instance, and it's perfectly fine. So here we see her, she comes to her grandma. She's scared at first. The grandma says there's nothing to be scared of. We're going to go back and be with God and the angels. Now we have Thaisa. She learns about this attack ad where her opponent calls her a cannibal. And Simone, her wife, says, just go take Sammy to the park. And she gives her an imperative to go enjoy your day with him. And she puts that very plainly. So that's Thaisa's goals, like to go enjoy her day, not think about this thing. And that's the setup of what's going to happen with her. Now we go to Shauna. I really like what they have her do here. So she's suspicious of Jeff. What she's going to do is ask if he can pick her up. She says she's going to drop off the car to get fixed after the accident. She asks if he can pick her up at 4 because she knows that's what the text said, meet me at 4. It feels very real. I mean, I don't know exactly what someone would do if they suspected their spouse of cheating, but in addition to making him nail down exactly what his excuse will be, like she could just follow him, but she makes him give a specific excuse to catch him in a bigger lie. And I really like that she's basically giving him an out as well. And these are when you get into the deeper psychology of things, you never know exactly what was being thought of when they wrote it or not. But if you build good, well-rounded characters, these things tend to come out. And I thought that was a great detail, that it's like my interpretation of it is she doesn't want it to be true. She wants him to say, yeah, I'll pick you up at 4. And although there'd be lingering doubts, it kind of solves the problem for her. At least it allows her to pretend the problem is gone. So she gives him this chance to choose her, right? When he says, no, I've got this work thing, I have to be at work. So that's the setup for her journey of investigating him. We have Natalie and Misty. Misty is super excited to be with Natalie, and Natalie is less excited about it. We have a little thing with Misty mentions she's been texting with some suitor. And this is not... So, in terms of structure, it's going to come back later. And like we talked about last time, it's important that like everything is introduced, even if it's subtle. It's just so much more effective when it comes back later than if you brought it out of the blue. So when it comes up later, we just enjoy it more because we remember, oh yeah, she mentioned she was texting with someone. Now, in terms of structure, completely objective, not knowing any details of the actual show or episode, in terms of structure, I would say the ideal way to do that is to have us actively wondering who she could be texting with. Have there be something we were like, wait, why would Misty be texting with someone? That's not what we do here, and it's not realistic to have like structurally the ultimate version of everything. It's perfectly fine as it is, but it's important to take note of these things as we're writing, to always push to see if there's an even better option. So they get to the gas station. They have this little standoff that I enjoyed a lot. I thought it was, since they set up that Natalie's kind of annoyed with Misty, Natalie says, oh, go in and get us some food, and Misty just trying to give her excuses why she can't do that. I thought Natalie was just going to take off with the car. In reality, what happens is she uses the opportunity of being alone in the car to search through the glove box and find that Misty... She finds a piece of her own, Natalie's motor, which confirms her suspicion that Misty sabotaged Natalie's car in order to... Well, I guess we don't have the answer to exactly why, but we kind of know. But I think the idea is we suspect Misty a little. We're a little untrusting of her. but it also doesn't use that as like something to focus on. It's sort of there in the background, but there's nothing else that makes us really doubt Misty specifically. But anyway, that's there. And it also doesn't really end up influencing their dynamic at all. Maybe a little, but Natalie's always kind of annoyed with Misty anyway. So it doesn't really amount to much, but it does tie up those loose ends that we had from the end of the last episode. So now we have, again, this is just something that you would run into, right? They only have so much food and water. So they need to figure out what they're going to do next. Thaisa shows up. Well, first we have this other little storyline with Travis and Javi, his younger brother. Travis grabs some food. He takes more than what was actually his. Everyone gets mad, and then we have Natalie sort of defending him because his dad just died and leave him alone. So we have him kind of trying to take care of Javi by giving him some food, but we also introduce this idea where Javi is still chewing on his gum, and Travis tells him to spit it out. And the gum is a tie to their dad, because the dad gave him gum so his ears wouldn't pop on the plane. And that's why Javi is reluctant to get rid of it. So he sort of wraps it up, but he doesn't throw it away. Then we have Misty, who has also stolen extra food so she can ingratiate herself with Ben, the coach. He doesn't want to eat, but she pulls the same trick we saw her use with the old woman in the first episode. She says, you can't take your pain medication if you're not eating. Then we also introduce this idea. Well, we saw Lottie searching for her pills in the last episode. We see that she's down to her last pill. So it launches this thing for this episode about Lottie starting to move towards her more natural state, which is going to make her more in tune with these natural or / supernatural forces in the woods. She's sort of the conduit for, at least originally, all the supernatural stuff that happens. So Thaisa gets back, and this is just a great conundrum that you'd have to face, because the main advice you get if you're lost is to stay where you are so people can find you. Thaisa gets back and says, I found a lake. So now they have this sort of standoff where Jackie, and of course Jackie is going to take the like old school is what I want to say, but like the more regular world approach, which is to stay put. That's what we've been told to do. Thaisa says, we can't, it's been several days already. We can't sit around waiting. We're going to run out of food and water. We need to go to the lake. So they have a big vote on it. It's like a big emotional thing. They both feel very strongly about it. And it's going to also launch the Shauna and Jackie storyline for this episode, which is Shauna is going to vote to go to the lake, and Jackie feels personally offended by this, as if Shauna betrayed her. And so the vote wins. They decide to go to the lake. And I'm glad they showed this. It would have been less dramatic if they realized this is what they need to do before they had the argument. So they don't do it until after they have the argument to get the maximum drama. But this is clearly the answer to the problem. Like, the real answer is to go to the lake, but leave some sort of message should someone come across the plane. so they can still find them. So here Taissa comes up to Shauna and says, like, hey, thanks for having my back in the vote. And I like this moment where Shauna says, I didn't have your back, I just did what I thought was best. And Taissa says, well, you made the right choice. And Shauna says, you don't know that. I think it is, but you don't know that. And I really loved that moment because I feel like that's such a realistic type of interaction, or it's what I would say in her place, but it's not the type of thing you typically see in television. Usually people have very direct motives and very clear outcomes for all their decisions, and that's the way it should be because it's hard to keep track of, that's easier for the audience to track. But I really liked that moment. It also, of course, shows us that when she tells Jackie it's nothing personal, that was true. But also, Shauna's gonna offer Jackie a sip of her water, and Jackie's like, ew, I don't want your back washed. So it's just this little thing. It's showing that she is upset with her. Okay, so now we have Shauna staked out. It's 4:00. Jeff is supposed to be at work during this time, and we see him get in his car and leave. So she is going to follow him. Now, this is, as we talked about, just that putting a character in a tree and throwing rocks at them. Nothing is going to ever come easily, and including me finishing that sentence. And I've said this before, but the most important thing is that we know that's something that's true. It's also good to examine the reasons why it's true. But most importantly, we can kind of just like ape these trends because they've come up so much. But why do I think it's true? I think, A, it fleshes scenes out so they don't end after 10 seconds. And B, it shows how important the goal is for Shauna because she's overcoming obstacles to get there. And then C, it's just more fun stuff for us. It's more interesting for us to watch, to see little bits of obstacles always being overcome, those little shots of dopamine or serotonin or whatever we get. So she runs into little problems before she gets to the end of this scene, which is going to be the end at the hotel. So within this one scene, this setup, build, and payoff is she's following him. The payoff is they get to the hotel. And the build is she runs into these things. First, a car gets between them. So that's one thing. Then the car switches lanes. But now it's a problem that she's directly behind Jeff, and she has to crouch down because she's afraid he's going to see her in the rear view. Then she's not looking because she's hiding, so she doesn't see that he starts to drive, and she's behind the light. Time-wise, she guns it to make the light, but other cars are already coming, cross-traffic is coming, so that's like a scary thing that happens. And then we end with him getting to the hotel, which is a great payoff to this scene because it leads very naturally into, it's both an answer and a question, because she's going to have to find out what goes on in there, but it's an impactful thing because if we saw him stop at, I don't know, if we saw him stop at their kid's school, then there's other things we might be thinking, excuses he could have. But a hotel is obviously someplace now we're thinking, okay, he is going to have an affair. Right? A hotel is a bad place for him to wind up if you're worried he's going to have an affair. Okay, let's go past that. But I love this scene. They're walking, so this is like a build of the thing of them deciding to get to the lake. It builds to get to the lake, and then they get to the lake. This is introducing a lurking danger, and they find a dead bear. I really like it because if you want to introduce danger, you could have a sign that there are bears. But you want to elevate everything. So what's scarier than a bear? Something that can kill a bear. It's so simple, but so smart to just elevate that beyond. And then they talk about what could have done this. Oh, a wolf or wolves. They say a wolf could do this, and the coach says wolves can take down anything if the pack is big enough. So it's this real creepy, like lurking fear in the background because we don't know how big the pack is, but we know they can at least kill a bear. So without having to actually see them yet, which, I mean, that would obviously be a big dramatic action moment, but we've chosen here to keep that as just sort of a lurking fear in the background to come back later. I mean, in reality, it's seeing. I guess they saw something that indicated he was torn apart. In reality, the bear, he could have died and been picked apart by scavengers. He could have had some sort of bear cancer. I don't know much about bears and cancer, but they're mammals. Presumably, they can die in all sorts of reasons that don't involve being killed by another animal. But here, we somehow know it was killed as something more powerful than a bear. So now we have Thaisa at the park with Sammy. We get the answer to who this reporter lady is. We learn that she is working for Thaisa. But she's not doing anything really bad. She's just trying to make sure that nobody's talking. So it's like the most sort of innocent reason for Thaisa to be secretly employing this reporter who we have been wondering about. It doesn't really affect things that much. It matters that nobody else knows that she's working for Thaisa for events that happen in the future, but it doesn't really come back ever that she is specifically working for Thaisa. But anyway, she gives Thaisa, this is Jessica, the reporter, gives Thaisa the information that the opponent who ran the attack ad has a daughter who's been in rehab a bunch of times. She's 18 now, so she's fair game to mention in an attack ad. To be clear, that's the fair game I was talking about. And, boy, that was poor phrasing. But it's their phrasing. That's what they said. They say she's fair game to be mentioned in the attack ad, and also, yeah, that's what happens there. So the call is interrupted because Sammy has, like, punched this kid. So this is Thaisa trying to enjoy the time with Sammy. She gets this information. So this is elevating the question of how do we respond, because now she has a thing she can respond with an attack ad. But morally, she's already introduced the idea that she's struggling with whether to play dirty or not. But we find out that it's also dovetailing because this cannibal ad, the other kid says Sammy's mom is a cannibal, and that's why Sammy hits him. But it's also relaunching this idea of, is Sammy disturbed? Is he in trouble behaviorally? Because hitting people is bad. And that's back to back with this scene. This is very quick. So I'll bring it up when it happens later, the editing in an interesting way. But whenever we bring it, so ultimately Sammy is not as disturbed as we think. It turns out that Thaisa is actually like truly deeply psychologically unwell, and she's been doing the things that she thinks Sammy has been doing. I mean, she didn't punch the kid, but this is just a very quick scene where Thaisa thinks she like sees something in the woods, and she's like, "Oh no, nothing." So I guess this is like technically like more of a build to them getting to the lake, but it doesn't really serve that purpose. It's more building these things that are going on in the current timeline, more so about what's lurking there with the weirdness of her. And whenever we bring up the Sammy stuff, it also is like a little bit of, or is it Thaisa? So it doesn't come out of nowhere that it turns out to be her. The Sammy stuff is always paired with weird stuff going on with her as well. So now we learn, as I said, that the kid called her a cannibal. That's why Sammy punched him. So she's going to go try and resolve this issue with Sammy. But he's going to escalate the overall thing and escalate within this scene by being kind of creepy and defiant. She says, "I'm taking away your Manny doll so you can learn that actions have consequences." And then he's like, "Give him back." And then we get this moment that was very, very satisfying to me. I love using the past, the fact that they have this survivalist, like, do what's necessary thing in their past. It's satisfying for me to see that come out in the present. So I like that Sammy challenges her and she stands up and she's just like, "Go to your fucking room," basically, before she doesn't actually threaten him, but her presence does, in the sense that, like, at first we're a little scared of Sammy, and then she's like, she stands up in a way that indicates, "I've fucking eaten people. I've murdered people. Go to your fucking room. I'm not afraid of you, little kid." So I enjoyed that. So now we're continuing to point out that we don't know what the right thing was. Jackie's still complaining about we should have stayed at the airplane. And then we see the lake. And we really live in this payoff of the lake that really shows how important this was. And it's this really beautiful couple scenes of them just celebrating and enjoying and living in this moment. And I'm reminded of this episode of the podcast with Paul Scheer and Amy Nichols, where they talk about movies. And they were talking about a Wes Anderson movie, and Amy Nichols gave the criticism that, like, she feels like Wes Anderson's sort of using music that we already feel emotions about. It's almost sort of manipulative that he's using these good songs because we already have an emotional reaction to them. That specific sense, it was an interesting idea that I hadn't thought of before. I disagree with her about that. I feel like Wes Anderson's, at least with Royal Tenenbaums, which they were talking about, I think it's so clear that he at least gives this impression that he is like the type of guy who loved music, loved mixtapes, loved deep dives into music. Maybe she happened to have the exact same tastes as him, so she knew all those songs, but I thought he picked everything perfectly. It's like exactly on the level of obscureness that it should have been for that time and place. And they were all really... It was also exposing the audience to these things. Anyway, I really liked that soundtrack, and I thought it was well done. But going off that idea, sometimes this show I do feel like... And it's not a bad thing to use good songs still. That's still, like, very arguable either way. But sometimes I feel like the songs are better than what they need to be, if that makes sense. They play this Cranberries song, and all this is to just say it really is great here. The song that they use, the Cranberries in Dreams or something about dreams. It's one of their biggest songs, but it's really beautiful. This scene is really satisfying to see them celebrate. And then, so the past is less segmented, but we do have all these little things we're tracking. Lottie, the medicine and the mental illness, Jackie and Shauna, etc., etc. Misty and the coach. There's little shots in here to emphasize all of those. Well, I guess not the... Anyway, to emphasize most of those little things within the bigger scene. We also get them talking about Travis for the first time sexually. So now it's becoming relevant. He and his brother and the coach are the only guys there amongst a bunch of girls. Young women. So now we have Misty and Natalie again. It's not really something we're tracking that Natalie found the piece of her motor, but that's there. So they find Travis's house. They get an obstacle. He's not there, and also the door's locked. So what's better than the door just being open, having it be locked, and then they break the window? And then as you write things, it creates new opportunities. So that's good just because it's one more step along the way, but then also that allows us to have a cop show up and arrest them for breaking and entering. We didn't need to have a cop show up. If that wasn't one of our goals, we don't need to have that. But the fact that they broke the window gives us these extra things, right? And it still wouldn't seem out of place or weird if they didn't get arrested. It's totally believable. But now either way, it's believable, whether they do or don't get arrested. So they come in. The two characters have different motivations, and we're sort of tracking we sort of have two different ways we're told to feel about this. Because Misty is treating it as if Travis is likely the person who sent the envelopes, the like pre-ransom envelope postcards. So we're suspecting him in that way, but also, and the music and stuff is used to like have these two distinctive feelings that it kind of goes back and forth with, because it ends with Natalie having this really heartfelt. The way she feels about this is not like, I think Travis is up to no good. It's more just, I'm worried about him. I still love him as a person, and I want to make sure he's okay. And he meant so much to me in my life. So I would say as a general rule, structurally, that's going to be confusing. I'm not saying it doesn't work here. I'm just saying something to keep in mind. They also find this alcohol. So Misty finds a pay stub. They know he's barely making over minimum wage. And they find this bottle of alcohol that's $200. That launches different questions. It doesn't actually, I don't think, pay off with either one, but and they don't specifically ask these questions. It's just sort of thrown out there, oh, this is something, it's weird that he can afford this. So in my mind, what that makes me think is he could be doing some sort of illegal thing, which makes him more likely to be sending the postcards, I guess. But it doesn't necessarily mean he did that. Also makes me wonder if he's... it's like a last hurrah before he kills himself sort of thing. So I guess it does pay off in that sense. But And now we get Natalie reminiscing. She finds the picture. But then we also cut back to this. It's got a little bit of creepiness still, because then she thinks she sees his reflection in the mirror, but then he's not there. So it's almost like bringing the two motivations together in this one shot of him behind her. Okay, so now they're collecting water. That's what the lake is good for. Misty trying to ingratiate herself with the coach. We see Shauna. It's a great shot. Looking at... So, yeah, Jackie... Like, it's almost as if they're dating, and Jackie's showing... she's, like, laughing harder than she needs to at this other girl's joke, making Shauna jealous. Okay, we're back here. This is the stuff with the pay stub. And now we have a cop show up. So, nothing is going to happen easily, right? So he says, get on your knees. What could happen is they just get on their knees and the scene ends. What's more dramatic is for Natalie to not do it right away and to sort of challenge him, but it doesn't amount to anything. She doesn't try to grab his gun or anything crazy like that. She just gives him a little shit and doesn't do it right away. But she ultimately complies. And that's just one more rock being thrown at the tree of him trying to arrest them, right? It's just a little extra conflict along the way. And it's also because we've built this three-dimensional character. We, meaning the writers and myself, I'm taking full credit for it. No, that's just how I talk. But we have created this three-dimensional character, and we know it's fully within her like the milieu of what we expect from her psychology that's been created, that she would be a bit defiant. So now we have this sort of fun scene. Again, now Shauna's at the hotel. So what would be the next step? She wants to find the room to, like, spy even more. So she tries to get the information from the lady behind the desk. That's unsuccessful. She makes up this story about being an FBI agent, which is a fun choice because, I mean, it's just comical, some comedy, but then it gives a chance for Adam to play off it. Adam, who coincidentally shows up, and they have these sort of connections. They get each other right away. So he gets what she's doing right away and, like, plays into it. Now, it doesn't actually solve the problem. It actually just gives her an opportunity to walk away without looking too dumb and having the front desk person be like, I don't believe you. So it doesn't actually... I thought he was going to come in and back up her story and they were going to give her the room number, but that wouldn't really work for the plot because we need them to spend more time together still, so that's not what happens. Because he's there, I start questioning, and Shauna's not on paper questioning it at all yet, so I don't know to what extent the intent is for us to be questioning it, but I'm wondering, why the fuck did he show up? What a big coincidence. Is he up to no good and he's trying to get information from her or something? As it turns out, he is just randomly there. Okay, so now we have them in jail. This is when Natalie brings up the fact that she found the piece of her engine. She asks Misty point blank why she did it, and Misty answers point blank. She says, because you wouldn't have brought me along otherwise, and I wanted to come. So it's kind of the most normal reason. It's the one we would expect most, I guess. And it doesn't... I guess it wraps up... I mean, it just answers those questions in our minds, but it doesn't... It answers those questions in our minds because that is a real thing that would come up. We really would have to have them mention that at some point, but I guess the writers didn't feel that was needed to advance anything else in the story, so now we're just having them have this conversation and wrapping up those loose ends. How did they get out of jail? Well, we could have Natalie get out and immediately have her phone call get them out, but we have Natalie's phone call fail, so then Misty's will work out. It's just the extra little obstacle along the way. And these things create opportunities for us to put in other elements that we want. So we get this super quick thing with Thaisa because Natalie uses her one phone call to ask for Thaisa to bail her out. And Thaisa says there's too much pressure with the campaign. I can't have them trace this back to me. So it's emphasizing how stressed she is at the campaign, but also gives us a quick, subtle chance to see she's looking at Facebook or something. She's looking up the opponent's daughter here on her computer. She shuts Natalie down. And we also get an opportunity there to see how much this means to Natalie, because she stops being sort of her hard facade and she says, Thaisa, I need to find Travis. And it doesn't work in order for her to overcome the obstacle, but it shows us how important it is to her. Now we're continuing with this beach scene. We get these looks between Thaisa and Van, which doesn't mean much yet, but they are a couple, we'll learn. And then Lottie, who, she did just take her last pill today, so it shouldn't really be doing anything yet that she's off her meds, but whatever. She does see, she is the one who sees this house, this light off in the distance. So it launches this question, what's that light? It seems sort of man-made. Now we're going to go pursue that. We finished with the lake thing, we're going to the next thing. And again, it's the simplest form of a payoff leading to the next thing. The payoff is the lake, and then in the simplest, most physical, literal way, changing location literally allows them to see the next thing that they're going to go do, which is check out this shiny object. And it turns out to be this old cabin. Now, there is a thing right away where Lottie seems reluctant to go inside. So it is the first, launch setup of, I would say barely even a setup. It's just putting it out there so it means more when it does come back later. They look around to see what they can find. They could find a bunch of food. That would take away some of the drama of them needing food. So the only food they find is spoiled and disgusting. But Jackie does try to eat it first before splitting it up. So now she has also, much as Travis did and Misty did, she's sort of trying to take more than her fair share, but it goes wrong right away. She sort of freaks out about this whole thing. She's really not handling it well. So that's going to set up her making up with Shauna later. But we don't do that yet. One thing they do find is these old, vintage porno magazines. So it's sort of bringing back this idea of Travis as being of the opposite sex of them. And then we also reach ahead with Javi's gum. Travis goes out here. He tells Javi to spit out the gum. Javi doesn't want to, and now he just physically forces him to do it. And it's sort of this way of him dealing with the finality of the dad being gone. And, of course, we see Natalie looking at him even though he's just been like a dick to his brother, we see that she cares for him and she feels bad for him. There, that's a great visualization of that. Okay, now we're back to her in the modern time. Now it's time for Misty to make a call. Natalie says something about, who do you have to call? Your bird? And Misty has a funny comeback, so it's good just for a little bit of comic relief. Structurally, the ideal thing, again, would be if we are truly wondering, who the hell could Misty be calling? But we're not. I wasn't. I don't think that's a thing that is effectively... Again, it doesn't need... Not everything needs to be perfect, but in terms of the structure, the ideal thing would be if we actually are like, oh my God, Misty could only call her bird. Who the hell could she be calling? But it turns out to be, we'll find out later, it is the guy she was texting with earlier, and that guy happens to be Kevin, the cop, and she's been pretending that she's Natalie. So it also answers those questions, and it fits in with Misty's character we've established, because she's getting them out of jail. She's doing the effective thing, but in a creepy, lying sort of way. So now we have this scene that's really just Shauna and Adam connecting. It's important to show that she likes him. He definitely likes her. But she is still married. But then she sees something that she thinks confirms. She sees Jeff with this woman. So Misty explains to Natalie how she got them out, and then ends with a question. So that solves the problem of how did they get out of jail, and launches the next thing. Misty says, implies that they're going to be going home. Natalie says, we're not going home, and Misty says, where are we going? Cut. Okay, so now we're left wanting to know where they're going. Here we get Shauna apologizing that it hurt Jackie's feelings. And this is bringing them back together, solving that problem, and in doing so also making us feel how important they are to each other. They love each other. Their relationship is very, very important. And we get this thing where the coach starts to freak out. Misty goes to help him, and he slaps her. And it's this great moment, this sort of very in character for Misty, creepy, helpful dichotomy where she gets hit and you see she just narrows in and she doubles down. That makes her go and coddle him even more. And it gives this sense of she is determined to help, but also it's creepy, and that that's how she's going to have power. She's unwilling to give up the power that not being his caretaker would cause. Okay, so now, the last time we saw little girl Thaisa with her grandma, we were thinking the angels are coming. Now the grandma starts freaking out. And she's like, wait, I thought everything is fine. What's going on? And the grandma says something about, no, don't let him take my eyes, the man with no eyes. And Thaisa looks in the mirror. Again, this recurring thing of mirrors showing something that isn't really there. And she sees the man, this mythical thing that will come back as part of her subconscious, or whatever it is, this man with no eyes. And I laughed out loud at this scene. Not in a bad way, not because it's not effective as a scary thing, but precisely because it is effective. Because it was funny to me just how incredibly dark that is. That, like, your grandma's dying she's trying to tell you things that are going to be okay, and then it ends with not even like, we're not sure what happens, or even just you go away forever. It's, no, there's this evil man who's going to steal my eyes. It's funny to me how terrifying that is. And so this is going to come up again at the very end, but I mentioned last time about when it comes to the creepy stuff, they take more liberties. I mean, that's not the right way to say it, but they utilize the feelings from one timeline or scene carrying over to another more so. And I think that's because with creepy supernatural stuff, that works precisely because it's not as based in linear reality. So it is both effective and also it more accepted to have just sort of the vibes carry over and influence how we see things. So she goes to see Sammy. They sort of wrap up this problem. He had been defiant, and she's like, you understand why I did it, right? And he's like, yeah. So it solves that problem. But then it launches this new thing. He asks why people say bad things about her, and she says, you know, no matter what they say, I'm a good person, or something like that. And he says, I know, you're not the bad one. And then she clarifies a question in our mind by asking a literal question. She says, Sammy, is someone else the bad one? And then he just says, no, and goes to sleep. So, and that does feel more organic, to be fair, than like, there's a lot of things that I've pointed out with him previously that like it's almost sort of manipulative. Not that you shouldn't do it, it's effective, but kids being creepy is like, anyway, the point is, that's a totally real thing for a kid to do. Just go, no, and then like you don't really know what you're thinking anyway, and you certainly don't want to like tease it all out and say everything. So he just lets it go. But it then it clears up this thing with Sammy. So we stop worrying about Sammy, but now we're wondering who is the bad one. And an element of that is wondering what's going on with Thaisa. And this leads directly into something sort of being unlocked in her to carry over that association. That's exactly when she, as sort of the bad one, I guess, that's what we're wondering anyway, when she now decides she knows exactly what to do. She calls the opponent and she threatens him in no uncertain terms. She's like, don't fuck with me. You think I'm dangerous? I am dangerous. I will ruin you and your entire family if you do something like that again. Now we get, in some ways the opposite of that. We have Thaisa coming out to see Lottie. Lottie still hasn't gone inside the house. So Lottie is now, she is aware of certain things. She's in touch with supernatural things, and or she's going crazy. But she gets a bad feeling from the house. And Ty says, no, that's fucking dumb. I don't believe in that, and neither will you, is what she tells her. And she makes very good arguments. That she says, we just saw a bear who was torn apart by wolves. I'm not going to let you stand here alone. So Lottie reluctantly goes inside. Now we have the payoff of Shauna's story. We saw, the conclusion of her seeing Jeff with the woman is, in our minds for now, definitively ending the question of, is he cheating? Now what brings us to the next thing is now we see the result of that is she gets a room with Adam. And that's how her story ends for this. So it doesn't end on a explicit question, but we are left wondering like how that's going to impact things going forward. It's like a big moment. We know something has to happen because now she's had an affair. And now we get this thing where we have all three of the timelines of Thaisa being quickly cut together. And it, as I was saying, it is used in a way that takes full advantage of creepy vibes. So she's, in 2021, she's waking up, she thinks she hears something, she's walking towards it. 1988 or whatever this would be, her as a little kid at the grandma's funeral, walking towards the grandma on the altar or whatever dead people are on. And then her 1996, waking up and hearing something in the attic above them in the cabin. So we cut quickly between these things. She climbs the stairs to the attic. She descends the stairs in 2021 to her basement. And then she stays at the same elevation in the 80s and goes to see her grandma. And they all have a scary result. She sees that the Manny doll has been taken and torn apart in 2021, presumably by Sammy. So now we've relaunched wondering if we had stopped wondering about Sammy at the end of the last scene. Now we're wondering again. It escalates that again. Oh, Sammy is disturbed, it turns out. Now that's the thing we're tracking again. We closed Sammy. We opened a question about Thaisa, but now we've launched a bigger thing with Sammy. Now we really think he's disturbed. And part of that is because of these other scenes, so it seems more impactful. She sees Lottie huddled up in the attic. Lottie says, "I told you there's something," and we see there's the skeleton of the guy who used to live there, and it looks very scary. I will say it's effective seeing Lottie cowering there. It gives the viewer emotionally the type of reaction that you'd have seeing a skeleton. In other words, it's creepy and scary. So that's important to impart that onto us. It is a trope that I see a lot, that the child or young adult like huddled staring at the creepy thing. It is just kind of funny in how we use, I guess, mental illness to be like, oh yeah, they're doing this weird thing. Really, Lottie would be the last person in the world to be huddled up there with the skeleton. She was already afraid of going inside. If she saw that, she'd be like, what the fuck? And she'd get out and run outside. Definitely not stay up there with him. But anyway, it's creepy, so it makes us feel creepy, and that's the point. And then also the very creepy thing of the little girl, Thaisa, opens the grandma's eyes, and I guess this is a thing, they replace people's eyes in death when they're put out for display, so it's just a pure white thing. Her eyes have literally been taken, and it's a terrifying moment for her. Now, it's basically, it's affirming her suspicion that there is a man with no eyes who takes your eyes as you're dying. It's terrifying. Now we had launched a question, where are we going now with Natalie and Misty? This is how we're going to end. They go to Travis's work. Now, they're going to find him dead. They had to go to his work, really, because that's the only other place that was brought up. And it also is a natural place to go for information next. is it actually a natural place to find someone's body where they committed suicide or were killed? Probably not. They do, in, I guess, the second season, like, give us background that is consistent with why he would be going to work, but it is a bit sort of like, I mean, it's fine. It all checks out. I'm just saying, in terms of structurally putting the pieces together, the ideal thing is if there's some, like, real reason for them to go here other than just it's the only other information we have. And the reason ideally would be something that is consistent with this is where someone could have gone to kill themselves or commit suicide, as opposed to just their place of business. But they go here, and they get the answer for where's Travis. It is delayed for dramatic effect. Misty sees him first. She tries to push Natalie away from seeing him. And then we just see Natalie's reaction. And then we still don't see him for a very long time, till like the last shot we see him sort of blurry. So it's still not made super clear, but we see that he's hanging. And now, so the scene wraps up because the cops come. So we need to get them out of the scene before they can do too much investigating, because it'll be better for the plot if things aren't super easy for them, and they'll have to piece together things later. But I also really liked how it's another instance of them just having this survival instinct that's in all of them. You know, Misty is familiar with cop things, and Natalie's dealt with cops a lot. So both of them could have this, but it felt to me more just like a basic understanding of how you need to prioritize safety above emotions, and that as soon as they hear the cops, Misty's like, we gotta go, the cops are coming. So I just found that another satisfying thing, that they're like, they know what they need to do to not, suffer bad consequences. Although they had been arrested earlier, but whatever. Misty finds a thing. She did the old classic detective scratch-off pencil trick where she saw the last thing Travis had written on a memo. And it says, Natalie was right. She says, do you know what you were right about? Natalie says, no. So now we have a new question. What was Natalie right about? But Natalie says, I know I'm right about this. Travis didn't kill himself. So that launches a new... It wraps up the answer to this episode-long question. Where's Travis? Well, he's at work hanging dead. But it springboards us into the next thing, because now we want to see the next episode to find out who killed him. Structurally, the ideal thing, again, would be if we see something that makes it concretely clear that Travis did not kill himself. They do it here by just showing us the information in a way where we, as the viewer, are effectively told to believe it. The conviction that Natalie gives the line, like the music and everything that goes along the emotions we're told to experience as she's saying this, effectively they're saying, okay, so this is true now. We just believe her. So again, that it works if you display it that way, but the ideal thing would be if we, in our minds, didn't need to trust in Natalie in order to come to that conclusion. And there he is. And there we are. So we answered the question, is Jeff cheating? More or less we answered it. Yes, he is. And now what's going to happen is Sean is having an affair. Thaisa, what's she going to do about this guy who's running attack ads? Well, she shuts that down, but we're kind of left wondering what darkness is inside her. We solve the thing with Sammy's behavioral problems, but then launch a new thing at the end. Oh, he's even worse than we thought. Although, again, it has to be displayed that way, because technically striking another child is worse than destroying a doll, but it's less creepy. Much like a gun should be scarier than a knife, but a gun isn't creepy in a horror movie in the way that a knife is. So that's how creepiness works. It's about vibes. Yes, and then we just talked about Misty and Natalie. In the past, again, what I really like about it is the more organic, slower nature of that. But what have we done in the past? Well, Lottie, she ran out of pills, and then also there's this idea of a supernatural element simply because she somehow knew beforehand something creepy was going on. There's bad vibes in that house. We have Shauna and Jackie continue, that's wrapped up for this episode, but it's continuing to be this thing about the push and pull and how important they are to each other. And also the Jackie losing that vote is important to her being pushed to the outside of the group. And then Misty doubling down on taking care of Ben. Now we're left wondering sort of like what creepiness is going to come out of that with her manipulating that situation. So that is where we end this. That's where we start. That's where we end. That's where we are. And I will see you. You'll see me. I won't see you. But please leave a comment. Or whatever people say. But do. Okay.